Hello to all the loyal viewers and diehard fans of Jimmy Kimmel, the people who can watch 5 minutes of Trump footage and still somehow resist the urge to throw your TV out the window. I hope you're somewhere reasonably comfortable right now, maybe half sliding off the couch with your phone in one hand and a totally unnecessary late-night snack in the other, because tonight we're going to talk about one of the most unhinged episodes yet. The moment Donald Trump basically went on Air Force One and confessed that his big, brave liberation of Venezuela was really just a smash-and-grab operation for oil companies with a side order of, let's invade half the hemisphere for dessert. Picture this, Air Force One is descending toward Washington, D.C. This should be a solemn, serious moment. A president returning from war, soldiers deployed, people dead, an entire country rocked. Instead, what you see is small, pathetic, unhinged Donald Trump looking exhausted and strangely fragile while spewing fantasies about taking over Greenland, Cuba, Colombia, and Mexico like a cartoon villain who binge-watched too many bad 80 seconds action movies on the flight. Next to him, you've got Lindsey Graham, practically vibrating with excitement, and mega-billionaire Howard Lutnick, all of them sounding less like leaders of a democracy and more like the board of directors of a criminal syndicate arguing over who gets which piece of the loot. Trump is asked a simple grown-up question. Did you talk to oil companies before this operation took place? And he says yes, not just yes, but yes before and after. He brags that they're ready to go in, that they're going to do a great job for the people of Venezuela and represent us well. That's not foreign policy language. That's a contractor talking about fixing your kitchen. Only in this case, the kitchen is an entire sovereign country that didn't ask to be renovated. And the contractors are multinational oil corporations salivating over that beautiful Venezuelan oil. Then Trump goes even further. He claims Venezuela stole our property. He says they took our oil, took our infrastructure, and that this was the greatest theft in the history of America. Not subtle, not coded, just straight up. They took what's ours, now we're going in to take it back. Never mind that the oil in Venezuela belongs to, Venezuela. Never mind that international law doesn't recognize, I kind of wanted that as a valid reason for invading a country. In Trump world, if he thinks America had a claim, then it's his personal property, and sending in missiles is just an especially loud version of changing the locks. While he's saying this, there's another clock ticking in the background. The Department of Justice was supposed to turn in an explanation for redactions and a status report on the Epstein files. Deadline, yesterday. They blew it. They missed the date. So if you're wondering why the president suddenly decided to launch a giant, illegally justified war and then brag about it like an infomercial at 35,000 feet, you don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to see the pattern. When legal trouble gets too close, Trump doesn't reach for transparency. He reaches for fireworks. If he could bulldoze a courtroom with a tank, he'd call it redecorating. Reporters try to drag the conversation back to democracy. They ask, are you going to insist that Delcy Rodriguez Maduro's right-hand woman, who's now acting president, allow opposition figures to return? Will you demand she release political prisoners? Will you push for free and fair elections so people like Maria Corina Machado or Edmundo Gonzalez can actually run? That's the moment when any president who cared about human rights would say, yes, absolutely, that's the point. Trump's answer? We haven't gotten to that yet. Right now, what we want to do is fix up the oil, fix up the country, bring the country back, and then have elections. In other words, first we get the oil and other things, then maybe someday we'll talk about democracy. If the phrase, we want our own authoritarian puppet there so we can take the oil, had a human voice, it would be this interview. When pressed on what he needs from Delcy Rodriguez, he doesn't even bother pretending. We need access to the oil and to other things in their country. A lot of things, roads that aren't built, bridges that are falling down. He rambles about infrastructure while clearly meaning resources, minerals, steel, rare earths, the whole shopping list. Then he says, almost as an afterthought, that they'll rebuild the country by letting American corporations strip it for parts. It's like listening to someone pitch colonialism as a job creation program. And just when you think it can't get more ridiculous, Trump casually adds Greenland to his imperial wish list. He says, we're coming for Greenland next. Maybe not tomorrow, but in the next 2 months, we're taking Greenland. He claims the European Union's going to give it to us because they want the U.S. to have it. He insists Russian and Chinese ships are all over the place around Greenland and that Denmark can't handle it. His big example of Danish military weakness? In his telling, they added one more dog sled for security. That's not foreign policy. That's your drunk uncle doing a racist bit at Christmas and confusing it with analysis. Meanwhile, he's asked about Delcy Rodriguez calling what they did to Maduro kidnapping, and instead of denying it, Trump smirks and says, that's not a bad term. He practically leans into it. We kidnap leaders of sovereign countries is not something you shout from Air Force One if you care about international law. It is something you shout if you've given up on law altogether and you're just going full gangster on camera. Then reporters ask if American troops are going to be on the ground in Venezuela. Do we have any limits? Is this as far as it goes? Trump shrugs it off. Maybe. Depends on whether Delcy gives us all of the oil. If she doesn't, he says there'll be a second shot. And yes, absolutely, there will be boots on the ground. This is not subtle. The message to Venezuelans is, give us everything we want, or we'll send more missiles and more soldiers. The message to the rest of the world is, whoever has what we want is next. It gets even darker when he starts talking about sick neighbors. Trump calls Venezuela very sick, calls Colombia very sick, and says its president is a guy who likes baking cocaine and selling it to the U.S. He then basically threatens Colombia on national television, hinting at future operations because he's not going to be doing it very long. No evidence, no nuance, just a president of the United States accusing another leader of running cocaine labs and hinting that U.S. forces might be heading there, too. Lindsey Graham, for his part, plays the role of cartoon henchman perfectly. He sits there, practically foaming, talking about how Cuba, your days are numbered. He praises Trump for doing what others didn't have the guts to do and insists this isn't interventionism. It's just making America safer and more prosperous thanks to business deals. That's the tell. They're not even pretending this is about freedom. It's about money. It's about contracts. It's about taking resources from countries they just bombed and calling it peace. Then comes Howard Lutnick, the billionaire, who confirms what you already knew from the tone of the room. He talks about Venezuelan steel, minerals, mining, rare earth elements, not as Venezuelan assets, but as things that are going to be ours now. He describes the economy as a wreck that Trump will fix by letting American corporations absorb the resources. He even chuckles that rare earth isn't rare. What's rare is the processing power, which he very conveniently says the U.S. is building all over. It's one of the few truly honest moments in the whole circus. They say out loud that this is about stealing resources and calling it reconstruction. After all that, Trump turns his attention to Mexico. He says you have to do something with Mexico, that they have to get their act together, and warns that we're going to have to do something if they don't stop migrants. He blames cartels, threatens action, and leaves enough ambiguity that everyone knows what he's hinting at without him having to say the word invasion again. And just when you think the narcissism has plateaued, he veers off into a monologue about 9/11. He claims he predicted the attack, that he warned the world about Osama bin Laden in one of his books, that if people had listened to him, there would have been no World Trade Center tragedy. He even turns to Lindsey Graham like a student begging the teacher to back up his wild story. Did you know that? Did you hear that? I wrote about bin Laden. Lindsey, of course, nods and mutters, I just heard it right now, boss, like the sidekick in a cartoon who's one yes boss away from getting hit with an anvil. Here's the depressing part. This isn't a movie. These clowns, as even the original commentator called them, are not actors practicing lines for some forgotten streaming series. This is the President of the United States, a U.S. senator, and a billionaire financier casually describing war, resource theft, and kidnapping with the tone of people reviewing a restaurant. They talk about taking back what was stolen when nothing was stolen. They call Venezuela a narco-terrorist state, while they themselves sound like the bad guys in every narco movie ever made. And in the background of all this, experts are warning what anyone who's studied history already knows. Venezuela is perfect terrain for insurgency. It has mountains, jungles, armed groups, and a long tradition of resistance. Robert Pape, one of the top scholars on insurgencies, is basically waving a giant red flag saying this will be far worse than Iraq. Chaos is coming. And Trump's response is to talk about how excited his voters supposedly are that he's finally given them the war they wanted. That's the line that should chill you. Trump claims his base told him they do want war, that when he said no war, MAGA voters said, no, we want you to go to war with the Western Hemisphere. So now he's selling this as something his supporters demanded. A Don Roe doctrine of permanent domination, endless conflict, and corporate looting dressed up as patriotism. The saddest part is how familiar this feels if you've watched other authoritarian regimes. The propagandist tone, the casual dehumanization of sick neighbors, the bragging about kidnapping leaders, the insistence that we're going to fix their country by taking their resources. The needy obsession with being seen as a strategic genius, the guy who predicted 9/11, the guy who alone knows how to handle oil, the guy who deserves the Nobel Prize more than an actual Venezuelan dissident who risked her life for democracy. This is what it looks like when someone tries to run a democracy like a mafia state and doesn't care who sees it. If you're still here, still listening, you're already doing the most dangerous thing in this whole story. You're paying attention. You're not just staring at the memes of Trump pointing at a cartoon Venezuela map. You're not just laughing at Lindsey Graham's "we're coming for you next" tough guy act. You're hearing the words. You're connecting the dots between a missed Epstein deadline, a sudden war, and an Air Force One confession that the real client in this operation isn't the American people, it's the oil companies lining up for total access. Is the NREDS on? So keep laughing. We need sanity, and sometimes the only way to stay sane is to see how absurd this all is. Laugh at a president who thinks they stole our oil is a legal argument. At senators who talk like mob movie extras, at billionaires who pitch looting as potential. But when the laughter fades, remember who's paying the real price? Venezuelan civilians under bombs, neighbors threatened on live TV, and a world order that gets weaker every time Trump treats war like a marketing campaign. And if you want more people to see past the tough talk and into what's actually being done in their name, you know what to do. Hit like, make sure you're subscribed, drop a comment, share this with the friend who still thinks this is about freedom and not franchise rights to someone else's oil field. Because the more we talk openly about what Trump, Lindsey Graham, and their billionaire friends just said out loud, the harder it becomes for anyone to pretend this is normal or acceptable behavior from the people holding the most powerful office on earth.